think little me needs to know that while it all has semi-worked out, she needs to know that she's okay by herself.
Hi friend, I'm Lauren Jean. I'm a thinker, babbler, lover of stories and founder of Thinking of Me. Welcome to our first season of Women Only Speakers, where we talk all things empowerment, success, relationships, and above all else, self. I hope you might find a new thread of thought as you listen.
This episode of the Thinking of Me podcast contains sensitive content that may be triggering or disturbing to some listeners. Please proceed with caution and consider your well-being before continuing. If you feel the need, don't hesitate to seek support or take a break. As always, we encourage feedback and comments on the topics covered. Now, this week's episode.
Hello, and welcome to Thinking of Me podcast. Today we have Aoife Farrelly with us, and we were just chatting before we came on. I'm so grateful to see Aoife's face and chat with her. It's been a while. We would have been friends as kids, childhood friends, and this is the first time we're connecting in a couple of years, and we've chatted back and forth for definite, but this is great to get the chance and space to catch up and also to share what is definitely a journey. And I would just say to any friends listening today, there may be some topics that are sensitive and deep, and just an air of caution to continue with someone who has been, as I say, a friend for a long time. And Aoife, thank you for agreeing to come on, and thank you for sharing your story in the last few years and today. So I'll pass it over to you, Aoife, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for having me. I mean, it's you that reached out. I'm just kind of still going through the motions as it is. But yeah, for anybody that doesn't know me or hasn't seen my face in the last 3 years nearly, yeah, it's been a journey. Let's say that. It's been quite rough, but I think I'm hopefully getting near the end of it now.
Mm-hmm.
If life stops throwing stuff at me, we're nearly there. I'm nearly getting a grip on how this is supposed to go, I think. But yeah, I mean, I met you, what was I, like 5 or 6?
About that, yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's been nearly 20 years that I know you, Lauren.
No, it's not. It's like 10. I'm 17. I don't know about you.
Oh, I wish I was still 17. Oh my gosh, I wish. No, yeah, so I think this is even better speaking to somebody that I've known for this long, because you know the family and you know the family dynamics, and you were, while you didn't know it, you were in my house and around the family when everything was going on. And like you said, we were chatting before we came on, and we were even speaking about, how you didn't know and how it wasn't very apparent to anybody, really. That was, I mean, even my poor grandparents didn't know what was happening to me. And I think that really is just a testament to how well everything was hidden, and how I'm, not to toot my own horn, but how well I kept everything together even at a young age. But I think now, especially since I turned 20, I tried to change my narrative of my life and the direction in which my life was going. And I think nowadays I'm not going to hold my tongue anymore and defend people or try and keep relationships that shouldn't be there in the first place, and try to protect people that should have protected me but didn't. So that's where I'm at today. I think that's about as good of a catch up of everything that I could really say, to be honest.
And Aoife, like, all of that of where you are right now, and for friends listening, Aoife might share some of all the hidden that there's been, but the acknowledgement that this has happened, this has been happening, these are situations where, as a child, we're not being the ones protected. When it comes to the point, and as you said, like when you hit your 20s, and that there, or at whatever age that comes to a point of, I need to talk about this has to come out, is a massive turning curve of the journey. And I just think your strength, Aoife, to see that and continue with that for yourself. I just want to say loudly for the kind of sake of this as well, anyone who knows Aoife's story or knows the community background, even Irish context in general, even if not the specifics of a certain area or anything, there is a stigma to not holding your tongue anymore. And there's a whole new series of challenges that can come with that, and we might get into that. But Aoife, would you like to say what it is you started to talk about when you started to realise that all these things that were happening really aren't okay, and maybe why you decided to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was a very, very young child when my brother Cian started abusing me. I was about 6 when it started, and it went on for about 2.5 years. So I was nearly 9 when the abuse finally finished. And I think to know, even though I was so young, it was me that made sure that the abuse stopped. I told my parents about what Cian was doing to me, and they confronted him. But I mean, this was happening like every week, a couple of times a week, especially on a Saturday. I mean, as you know, our dad was a farmer, mum was a stay-at-home mum, and he was out the house for a long time, and mum was kind of scooting about doing all the activities: swimming, Irish dancing, acting, Gaelic football, camogie, all that lovely stuff that a child should be able to do. But unfortunately, they weren't there in the house, so I was left in his care. And yeah, it happened on a weekly basis for about 2.5 years. And it went through an awful lot of violence trying to stop it. It even Justice Paul McDermott, when he gave his sentencing back in 2022, says that there was a very high degree of violence in it. It would land up with me kicking and screaming and trying to get him to stop. But unfortunately, living in rural Ireland with 100 acres of farmland around and not really anybody else, nobody could hear me, nobody could save me. I had to then end up saving myself, I guess, is the best way that I could put it. I told my parents the week before my communion, and from there then I made sure that I myself was never alone with Cian. I would go across the road to my grandparents' house. I would make sure that even if I didn't want to go swimming, even if I didn't want to sit at the sideline of a football pitch in the freezing cold in the midst of winter, I was there. I was down the farm. I was the dairy maid. I was the one that helped Dad with the calves in the winter and the milkins, and I had my own little pair of wellies and my own overalls, and I was up and down to the farm the whole time. And I just made sure that I was there even more, and that Cian would never ever be allowed near me ever again. And then playing music and that, it was quite weird. A lot of his main friends through music are now some of my closest friends, because I used to always kind of scoot about to the FLA and the summer schools and that, and I met them there through him. But now, thankfully, since everything came out, I managed to retain my friends, and they're some of my best friends now. But yeah, going to the FLA and that, even, you go to Sligo for the All Ireland and you'd have to stay for the weekend. I made sure that my granddad was there, so he was staying there, I was staying there, but my granddad was not ever too far away from me. Same with the summer schools. We go to Drumshambo for the week, and mum and dad would let me off because I was doing the classes. He was just there to party or whatever, but Granda Joe was always there. So thankfully, I managed to have my head screwed on from a very young age, which is also quite sad that I had to. But yeah, I very much had my head screwed on from a very young age, and just made sure that I was safe and I was protecting myself from him, and that he wouldn't be allowed to do that to me ever again. But unfortunately, it just kept getting worse because COVID came around and I had to move home. I moved out when I was like 17 for uni and hated living back home because it meant he was there. And having to go through lockdown and not be able to leave the house, I felt like, part of me I think felt like the abuse was going to start again because he had such access to me, and because mum and dad allowed him to stay in the house even years, even like 10 years after knowing what he did, he was still living in the house. And right up until the day that he was brought in for questioning by An Garda Síochána, he was living in that house. And it's quite disappointing when I think back on everything that I've gone through and I've been put through, should I say, as well. But yeah, I think I kind of, around COVID time, just before COVID started actually in March, I says, right, screw this. I am sick of drinking my life away. I'm sick of taking drugs. I'm sick of self-harming. I had an eating disorder at the time. Thankfully, have recovered, nearly fully recovered from that. But yeah, it was March 2020 and I went to a new therapist, and naturally enough, as you know yourself, they have to ask if there's any sort of child protection issues or anything like that. And yeah, I just said, right, here we go. Here goes nothing. I'm just going to tell you all of my childhood trauma, launch it onto you. Happy days. An hour later, I was in floods of tears. She was gobsmacked. And I went home and she started the whole process for me. And if it wasn't for her, I probably would have done it myself. But at that time, I mean, none of us knew what COVID was going to be or how long we were going to be at home. So I, just started the ball rolling with that. And then when I moved out in the August of 2020, that was when I officially started the whole legal process. Went in October 8th, I think it was, of 2020, gave my statement, told them again every bit of childhood trauma that I have, and they took my report, read it all back to me, recorded it all, and by December, the first week of December, he had been brought in for questioning. He admitted to everything, and yeah, that was my last Christmas, really. I asked my liaison officer, I said, I would like one last Christmas, just ourselves in Ballymanus without Cian, and that's what I got. So since then, it's just been a bit of a topsy-turvy, up and down kind of road. So yeah. And then I
I'll
went
jump in.
to...
Is that okay for a sec?
Absolutely.
Just to say, in being able to tell your story like that, that takes a lot. And I know what that's like to say it out loud and hear it. And the first time you do that, being in a room, whether it's, with a therapist or with a qualified professional or with someone who can hold that for you, or wherever it comes out. And for friends listening, absolutely finding the right supports is the essential part. But saying it is where you said there, like, that breakdown can happen. And I just want to say again, the strength that you have and the distance you've come from that point to now kind of just saying it like that back across a couple of minutes and being able to articulate it and being able to go, well, this is it. And that power that comes with that, so not to kind of discredit how much work that takes. And for anyone listening with the story, the more we make sense of it, and Aoife, I read you mentioned, is it Paul McDermott? As someone who knew you, and everything, you can't make sense of things that don't make sense, and particularly at a young age. And everything you said there on having to do that, and I know what that's like. I really do, of trying to caretake for your safety, and micromanage situations, and are they near me, are they not near me, is something going to happen now? Trauma by definition is too much, too soon, too fast, and all of that. But trauma and development as a child is something that should never ever have to happen, ever. And the CPTSD that comes alongside that, like complex post-traumatic stress, complex in the sense that it's something that's repeatedly happened, not just one traumatic event, it has a lifelong impact on your development, your sense of self, your safety, your relationships, your substance use, all of that. And I honestly could not get my head around it. I know I'm not the only one. It's not about me. This is your story. But as I read, as much as in trying to make sense of what doesn't make sense, do you know? And the sexual abuse that was, and some of the knock-on effects that you've said there, Aoife, I don't want to bring you back through any of that. And, as I say, caution for anyone listening that has strong resonation to this, and please do find where you need to for support. What were some of those moments like when did some of that kind of go, hey, I'm not this, I'm not that, or what was that like? What were kind of some of those kind of pivotal?
I think, it all started very much like, oh, it has to be our secret. And it was almost like he was playing a game with me. And, I couldn't tell anybody. And it was just Cian and Aoife's little secret. And I was such a good girl for keeping the secret. And quite like, thinking back now, like speaking down to me in that way was even just like, it boils my blood now, how he used to speak to me in those moments before anything even really started. And he'd be like very coercive throughout the rest of the week or throughout the rest of the days after the abuse and everything. And it was always like, it was like this game of like the cat and the mouse. Like I would be running away from him and I would be screaming my head off. Or if he was like to pick me up, he'd sometimes like pick me up bridal style so that I couldn't like hit him or anything. And I'd be screaming and crying and telling him to get off me. And he'd be standing with this smirk on his face, like, ha ha ha, I have you now, kind of thing. And it was always like this game with him, like how far could he push me? How far could he push the limits of what he was doing to me before I did eventually snap? Or like mum and dad would be out of the house, and mum would be out of the house with my sister, and it would just be me and him. And there's some Saturday mornings I remember he would just like, he'd come into my room, he'd creep into my room, I would never hear him, and then he'd just pull the covers off my bed, and that would be me. I would have been in a nice little slumber, and then suddenly boom, I didn't have any time to react, and it would happen. And he would, again, it would be like this game that he was, this mind game with me, like how far can he test the limits. And it was one of those last Saturdays that I just snapped. I snapped and I said, this isn't right. Like, I know of cousins, I know of friends that, like, people's houses that I was staying in at the time, little sleepovers and that had that brother-sister dynamic. And I never saw them acting like that. And that's when it started to kind of, the question started in my head, like, why is he doing this to my sister? No, he doesn't like my sister. He's always fighting with my sister, kind of thing. And I was like, so why is it me? Like, what? And then I tried to think back to when I was a baby. Like, did I do something wrong to deserve all of this? Is it just me? Is it, am I being too forward? Is it my fault that he's doing this to me? All of these questions in an 8-year-old's mind was just like a crazy. I mean, like, I don't want to toot my own horn, but like, you know my whole family, so you know that my uncles are married. My uncle is a gay man and he's married, and he got married around about that time as well. And I remember sitting my mum down and going, "Mum, by any chance, is he gay?" And I was quite like a forward thinker I was wise beyond my years kind of thing for the age that I was. So all of these questions and everything were all in my head. And then eventually that last Saturday I just snapped. And I remember I was brushing my teeth because my sister and I shared a bathroom. So I was brushing my teeth. She stayed one side of the hallway, I was the other side, and the bathroom was in the middle. You know yourself, the old house. And I brushed my teeth and I says to my mum, "Mum, I have something that I want to say to you. It's probably going to make you upset, and that I don't want you to go to swimming on Saturday." And she was like, "Okay." So I brought her into my room and I sat her down and I was on the bed, and it took me hours to get it out. I could not hold back the tears. I was in convulsions, and I just remember saying it to her like, "Mum, Cian's after touching me. I didn't like it. He keeps touching me even though I say no, and he told me not to tell you, so please don't tell him." And so she, I think from what she heard and from what 8-year-old me could tell her, she got the gist of what I was trying to say, and she went to my dad, and then they confronted him, and he says, "Right, that's it, I'm going to kill myself." And he ran out the house and down the road and wouldn't come back. So then, knowing what I know now and knowing how they are now, they went into, "Oh no, our poor son," and went into making sure that he was okay, and kind of in a way forgot about me. So yeah, it's been rough. It's been very rough. Trying to go back and trying to piece all of that together and trying to think of how 8-year-old me was thinking has actually been quite healing in a way, to kind of go, okay, so while I waited for 13 years to actually go to the Gardaí about it, I also dealt with it quite well back then, and I was very well informed back then, and I put boundaries in place and I advocated for myself.
I'm just going to jump in. Sorry, like what actually happened after that? Like, what?
So in the moments after I told my mum and dad.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned the change of situation, going down to the farm and with your grandparents' house and things like that. But did anything change? Was there any support? Did anything actually happen?
No, it just kind of, the next morning we all sat round the table, and the way that it was my dad sat at the head of the table and I was beside Cian and my sister was beside my mum, and that's how we've always sat, and that's how we continue to sit even afterwards. And even that in itself is
it's something I
ridiculous
said 100 times. And I'll tell you this, Aoife, because I don't think I've told you this. I found out like the way the rest of Ireland found out, and there'd been some space and distance, as you said, like from childhood years and that, and then college, and all these things happen, and that was the first thing that came out of my mouth. And he sat this. Sorry now, but I suppose this is my podcast. I can say what I like too, but it the first thing I was like, how could that keep happening? And that's where I went. And I'll never forget, I was down in the gym in Sandyford, and there was a friend who rang, you'd know her, and did I see the news? I was like, no, and I don't look at the news. I kind of avoid it like the plague, and because there's never anything good usually. But that was the first thing, was the kitchen table, and that was my mantra. In that, for you, Aoife, like how can that be the case?
Yeah, I know. And even like looking back now, like picking things apart, like picking my whole life apart over the last couple of years and going through the eating disorder treatment, like that's where the root of it was having to sit beside my abuser and eat meals, and him like being so close that he could touch me, and sometimes still touched, like grazed my leg, or would like reach over for, I don't know, like tomato sauce or something, or the milk, and I could hear him eat, and I could hear him swallow, and I could hear him still being basically existing beside me without any changes. There was absolutely no changes to his life despite what he did, and I just had to go on with it because I was still a child. And that's why I think I moved out just when I was 17, because I could not handle it anymore. And then that's really when the substance abuse started, and the restricting of my eating started, was because I was finally, for like Monday through to Friday, I was free from that, so I could do what I wanted. So I took the drugs and I was drinking, and if I didn't want to eat for 3 days, I didn't have to, because nobody was telling me that I had to. And I could, then come home at weekends, and I was straight back into having to sit beside Jean Farrelly. And it just, even to this day, boils my blood. And it boils my blood even more now because, I mean, they've moved house, they sold the old house, they're in a different house now, and he got out of prison in September, and he is in my bedroom, surrounded by all of my stuff, with a bed that I bought, all the bed linen that I bought, everything that is mine is in that room, and that same kitchen table they brought with them, and he's sitting there, and he's allowed to be in that space now in the new house. And even though he went to prison, nothing's really changed for him still.
Aoife, what brought you to get support? Because I know you've had a number of all the things, as you say, that when that freedom happens and that escape happens, I know that feeling. And it's like when you have the whole world, but you nearly don't know how to handle the world in a way. This is my resonation of it now. And you can do all these things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all these things are right or good necessarily. And by good, I mean, are going to be helpful for us. And when we haven't been shown or thought, or we don't have that kind of support network of a safe guide, things do happen. And thanks for your honesty, like there, of sharing, the kind of, as I say, different things like substances and whatever else. When did you kind of say, I need support and I need the right support?
I have been, again, trigger warning, I have been self-harming, or I was, thankfully not anymore. I was self-harming from about the age of 12. And if it wasn't for my old German teacher in secondary school telling my parents that I was self-harming and that she could see it, and then getting me into the young adult mental health services, I was what, 15, 16 then. That kind of started the ball rolling for, okay, right, I'm still technically not an adult yet, so I still could be taken away from my parents, because that was always my fear. And then, I think when I left them services, I was kind of on my own for a while until I started uni. And then in uni, I just, like I said, it was just that freedom. I just started everything that I possibly could get my hands on. And then after COVID, and after I started the whole kind of process of reporting and everything, I really went on a big bender during COVID, because that was kind of my way of coping with it. Because I couldn't speak to my parents, I couldn't speak to my sister, I couldn't speak to my grandparents, I couldn't really speak to any of my friends. And I had been told also not to speak to anybody about it in case Cian found out and did something about it, which could affect my case. So legally, I couldn't really speak to anybody either, even if I wanted to. So I was on my own in every sense of the word. I was alone, and there was only me to deal with it. And I couldn't deal with it. I could not deal with the weight of what happened. I could not deal with the anger that I was feeling. And I basically took all of the substances to try and manage all of what I was feeling. But it then got to a point after about a year and a half of just being high the whole time and kind of being a zombie, that I says, right, I can't do this anymore. I barely scraped through uni last year. So in the summer of 2021, I rang my GP and said, look, I know about this hospital in Dublin. I would really like to be an inpatient there. and he got the paperwork done for me. And on the 2nd of June, I went in and I spent about 4.5 months there. And I went through a full recovery program for narcotics, for alcohol, and then I also had like daily therapy. So they didn't really do much on PTSD because they didn't have the services for it, but just kind of like generalized anxiety, depression. I had a full meal plan, everything. I had a social worker because at that time I hadn't planned on moving. So they were going to get me social housing because I was still waiting for the court date and waiting for things to start. So that was really, again, I advocated for myself and just says, you know what, this isn't right anymore. I can't keep wasting my money, wasting my time, wasting my life on drugs and alcohol and self-harm. And I was so unwell in myself, and I was so unwell because of the lack of nutrition that I was getting as well. I just had to put a stop to it. And I think there's part of that was like, advocating for myself, knowing that this wasn't right. Part of it was also like, this is slowly killing me, and I'm too stubborn to let Cian Farley do that to me. So I think stubbornness and spite got me through the last like 10 years.
Aoife, I'm going to share with you, and again, in the hope that anyone listening, this is hitting, and if it's hitting in a hard, raw way, please do find where you need to go with it. But again, I said with how you can share your story, there's something in an abused child that, and whatever the abuse looks like, whether it's emotional, physical, sexual, abuse is abuse, and there's something in an abused child that does cause a stubbornness, that does bring about that I am going to be okay, and I have to be okay, and I have to fight this. And it does have great traits for that survival mechanism that's within all of us. But that's not always seen on the outside. And what I mean by that is I know, I can only speak about myself, I know the times when that out loud, that loudness is, I didn't realize, but like as a child, like, and Aoife maybe might agree with me here, like I'm loud at the best of times, but like I was a loud child, teenager, and it was because no one was listening. Like no one was listening to what was happening. And it's like, I actually only said this over the weekend. I joke about Southside Dublin and slag it off a bit, like, but it's always kind of thing like, oh, I'm from Pollard, but I'm not like from Pollard, from outside Pollard, that kind of thing. And you're trying to explain like countryside dynamics to Dublin dynamics, to over the water dynamics to our friends listening maybe across the water, all that kind of thing, all the different kind of cultural norms. But I was, the point is I was down Southside Dublin, I was just kind of explaining, it's like that feeling of there's an elephant in the room and you're going, there's the elephant, I can see the elephant, and you're describing what the elephant looks like, and there's either nobody listening to the fact that there is an elephant there, or they go, you're crazy, and you're literally looking at it and you're like, I can see this and I'm feeling this and I'm not comfortable because it's right there. And as I say then, so that kind of those traits that come out that we had to learn of holding our own and fighting and that might not necessarily have been there, can be hard for us to see, and is hurtful when others kind of see it that way. So I hear you on the stubbornness. That's what I'm trying to say, and I'm just sharing my story a little bit in there as well, because Aoife, if there was something, you mentioned that like your last Christmas in the house, and right now at this time we're just in the Christmas season. Like what would you love to hear, or what would you love to have said to you after you first said there's an elephant in the room, or even right now?
I think little me needs to know that while it all has semi worked out, she needs to know that she's okay by herself, without any support, and that while she was strong for the years during the abuse and immediately after, like, I am so much stronger now with all of the crap that has gone on even since Cian has gone into prison. You know, I don't need anybody. I genuinely don't need anybody. I am entirely self-sufficient, and I think at that time that would have been a crazy thing for me, because like I said, I was so afraid of being taken away from my parents, because obviously they're my parents and they're providing for me. But even now, like, I don't need anybody. I have myself, and I think little me needs to know that it's okay to be by myself, and eventually those voices and the flashbacks and the nightmares of the abuse start to kind of fade away, and it doesn't get any easier. I mean, anybody that says to an abuse survivor that it gets easier is talking absolute bullcrap, because that stays with us forever. But you do find ways to manage it, and you do find ways to, I mean, for the like of me, work in hospitality and have to smell Cian's aftershave every second male customer every single day, 5 days a week. And 2021 me, when I was just fresh out that mental hospital, fresh just moving over here, would cry out the back. I'm now serving them with a smile on my face going, ha ha ha, I hate you, Cian Farrelly. Hi there, what can I get for you? You know, that kind of thing. And it still affects you. It still stays with you for your everyday life, but you find ways of managing it. And you have to do that by yourself, for yourself, because nobody's going to come and save you, no matter who you want to.
That's the hardest lesson, you know, and
I
it's
think
also the
that
most
was
empowering lesson. Yeah.
yeah, that was the hardest lesson for me to have to learn, especially recently. Was I've never really asked for anything. I have always been like everybody. I mean, you probably know. I was always the child that was like, no, I'm going to do it myself. Even if I do it wrong 4 times, by the 5th time, I'll have sorted it out and I'll do it for myself. I was very headstrong, even as a child. And the only thing that I've ever asked for from specifically my mum, dad, and my sister was their unconditional support and their unwavering support. And I haven't got that over the last couple of years. So that has been a very, very hard pill to swallow, but it's also made me a lot hardier, and I don't take as much crap. So I kind of can thank them for that as well, I suppose. But yeah, it's been really hard, and I think this Christmas is probably going to be one of the hardest Christmases ever. I'm already dreading it. I had 2021 was over here, and mum and dad came over. 2022, because of court, I was down with my boss and his family, and was still quite numb because everything was still fresh from court. Last year I went home to Ireland thinking that it was just going to be us, and they still took calls from Cian on Christmas Day and made it very, very awkward and was very triggering. And this year, because of the choices that they've made and the situation that I'm in just now, I don't have anybody apart from my grandparents that I'm speaking to just now. So I'm going back down to my boss's house, and that is extremely disappointing. So, and I think I can speak for a lot of survivors. You know, the festive period, everybody is so happy, and whether that's forced or whether that's genuine. And you know, if you're struggling at all, people are kind of like, oh, but it's Christmas, come on, be happy, let's go.
Yeah. No.
Let's do 12 pubs. And it's like, no, I don't want to be alive right now, thank you, I'm just going to deal with that. So yeah, it's rough.
I've had Christmases like that, Aoife. As I say, my story is not your story at all. But last Christmas was the lowest for me. You talk about, you know, the different years and that there, and it's like as the awareness comes and habits don't change. So, you know, in the coaching realm, the whole thing is, you know, awareness, habits, competency then, you know, and building it into your everyday life. And coaching changed a lot of my mindset in ways that therapy didn't. And as you say, you mentioned there, like some of the supports that just aren't in the Irish system. And there's some great supports out there for definite and great resources. But it was, as I say, as new awarenesses were all still coming in and they don't stop. But what did start to change was as awareness would come, I found a new habit, I found a new way to control the only thing that I can, and that's me. And I can't change anyone else's perception of what is or isn't an elephant. And I can't change anyone else's habits of what is or isn't safe or language or anything like that. Like, you know, even sometimes the way you're spoken to and about and all that. And I'm saying all this on here because Christmas can bring up a lot. And when you're in a zone that hasn't changed and you're changing, it can go one way or the other. And yeah, so I really feel you there, Aoife. And I'd love to know, just because you kind of mentioned it a little bit as well, and it is something we've kind of chatted about on here this season, is I think stress is something that's just chronically been in your body. But I don't know if you've ever began a stress management awareness process or habit change, or when you're used to living with stress for so long, as I say, it's a bit strange to kind of go, okay, well, do you do yoga? Do you know, it's it's very different for us in kind of and seeing that. But what do you do that helps?
I mean, as you said, like it is hard to come from being in that fight or flight for so long to really kind of reset your brain and get the cogs to turn a different way, I think. I think what I
And it
have
takes
done,
time, Aoife. Just to say, sorry, it takes time, so be gentle, you know?
yeah, and it is weird because I think for me, I was so used to the stress and I was so used to living with that much adrenaline that over the last like 4 or 5 months, my body is like, oh, we don't need to do this anymore. Oh, right. Well, why are we tired now? Why are we able to sleep now? What's going on? Why can we breathe without feeling like there's something on our chest? Um, but I think, I have really tried to pinpoint what causes me the most stress in my life and have either tried to maneuver around it or just eradicate it entirely. And, while moving to Aberdeen has given me like an ocean between me and what causes me the most stress, aka Jean and Farrelly. The parents and the sister situation has been another one that I've had to maneuver in, especially over the last like 2 weeks. Since Cian came out of prison, I set my boundaries and I advocated for myself and I tried to maneuver all of that stress. And I was doing really, really well for about 2 months. And now I just need to go back to the drawing board again. There's no amount of, I think, putting it all out and then going, okay, right, but I can do this and then I can do this kind of thing that is going to get me entirely stress free, but we'll get there. So yeah, I think writing everything out is really, really good for me. Whether that's like just little bullet points or like a full 3 pages of something that is stressing me out. It's not so easy in work as it is in life, which is funny because my life is very complicated just now. But for work, it's like, if I have deadlines or I have content or I have whatever to do, I have orders that are due, I have customers that are ringing for food and stuff, I can kind of detail all of that and put it into like a little task sheet. And I feel like really, really proud of myself when I'm ticking off my little boxes that I made. And I'm like, okay, I did this, did that. So that kind of tracking is quite good. I think with the family and everything, I've blocked whoever I don't want to speak to on every form of social media and everything that I possibly can. And like I said, that was good for about 2 months. But then they arrived in Aberdeen, unannounced. So yeah, still trying to get through all of the emotions and everything of that. And I think it's still quite fresh just now, trying to deal with, being slightly ambushed in my workplace in the middle of the day by people that are still choosing to support my abuser. So that will be the next couple of weeks to months to years, however long it takes me to pinpoint it all and write it all out and get it all spoken about. But yeah, that right now.
Can I ask? Because that is something you said at the start, and you said this isn't my narrative. I don't want this to be my narrative. I don't want this to be my life. This needs to be taken out from under the carpet as such. I'd love to know, what do you see for yourself? What is the life that I know, when we're in that survival state, the only thing we think about and the only thing we want is that bit of safety, and knowing that the day to day is okay, and that's a perfectly fine an important place to be. But it sounds like with all the work over the last couple of years, and this might be helpful for other listeners as well that are in a similar situation to you, Aoife, and can see where you're at now. Like, now that all that work is happening and has happened, what would you love to say, this is my narrative, this is my future, my life?
I think it's quite a hard one to try and get out, because I have so many things that I would love to say. But I think the main ones are, I'm already, as I've said, I'm already self-sufficient. I'm in my own flat. I have my job. I see myself on this trajectory for the next couple of years, hopefully for life. I hate thinking that this is going to go away anytime soon, because I don't see it going away anytime soon. I don't want it to go away anytime soon. So that's why I'm working as much as I can. But yeah, I think, as I've said, I've created so many boundaries for myself to feel safe in where I am and what I'm doing. So work is going to stay where it is, and we're going to just keep working on that and keep building and keep growing the business and everything. Personally, I see myself just ticking along, to be honest, reaching out to survivors that I know or survivors that have just came forward. And if people want my help, if people want my advice, if they just want an ear to listen to or a shoulder to cry on, then I will do that too. Working on some projects with different survivors to help new survivors or survivors that have just came out with their own stories, and just kind of, I think I've created my own community over here, but I think growing that community is on the cards, and just trying to deal with all of everything else. That's basically, I think I have felt safe over here for a long time, and if I can deal with what just happened with the parents and the sister arriving unannounced, then that's fine. And if they can stop doing that as well, then I will be entirely safe in myself and I will be fine. And I think, just going forward is just kind of having the
You're
crack.
in that cocoon.
Yeah.
You're in that cocoon.
Yeah.
And I hear you. I love that. And for anyone listening, Aoife's Instagram is unapologetically Aoife, and you'll be able to see the links in that attached to this as well. But in keeping sharing your story is helping others, and I love that you know where you feel like you're becoming you. And I call here the plant pot. I've talked about it a lot, but yeah, getting a space to kind of allow that space to figure things out and know. You mentioned a little dream before we close. You did mention a little dream as a thought. I don't know if it's something you want to put out into the universe, but before we came on, you did say a thought of what you could do, but there's no pressure. But if you don't have to say it out, but it would that be, are those kind of dreams possible?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
What would it mean? What would it mean to, it's 10, 15 years of that? Like, what would that mean for other survivors and for you if you got to the point of being in that position to have next level? Like, because that's a whole other level. Like, that's, I don't think I'd even reach that high. But I'm reaching high in a different direction. But
yeah, I mean, I think if I've always said it, and I think I said it on the steps of the criminal court as well, was like, if there's anybody that sees my face and hears about my story and is going through something similar, has gone through something similar, just like to know that you can do it. And if I was to take the next step and go into law, we'll just say it, Lauren. We'll just say it.
The universe has it. It already had it when you said it to me. Now we're saying it further. It's in the universe's hands now, and yours, but it's out there.
Yeah. If I was to go into law, then that would definitely be a very big step up. To help people like me and other survivors that I'm constantly connecting with. It would mean the world. I think it would be like the biggest full circle ever to be able to advocate for other survivors and to be able to put the bad people away. And, you know, I think to try and navigate the justice system with survivors, because a lot of us don't actually know what we're doing. We have to rely on the people that are high up and, you know, our liaison officers and the DPP. We need to rely on those people. And a lot of it is like legal jargon that I had to go home and then try and look up. Or my poor liaison officer, I had to ring her like 4 times a day to be like, okay, so I've just got this set of paperwork in. What does this, and this mean? And then I went on to citizens' advice. And if it was just like, it came from somebody like me or somebody who's been in my situation that has a survivor, that then can go to whoever they're dealing with, be like, okay, so this is what's going to happen and this is what this means and this is how that it's going to be and all that jazz, then I think it would be so much better, and a lot of survivors would be more content with the outcome of things, and maybe it wouldn't be so hard for us to get the outcomes that we want.
I think we're going to do great things. I see it in the universe. Because everything you're doing right now. No, I like, look, it's good to dream. It's good to dream, and then we can see about envisioning it and all of that. Aoife, I'd love to ask, just as a final thought. I was 8 when I was younger. I can remember as 6, but I was 8 when things really were kind of mapped out a small bit for me, but the 4, 5, 6-year-old Aoife, what's one thing you love about her? And for anyone listening, when we can go back to there, if you're in any way of a similar story, we can go back to before anything. It's a fun thing to think about.
I think if we go back as far as, let's say, 4 or 5, like before the abuse started, you know, she had a childhood.
What did that look like?
A very, very happy household. And parents that loved each other and made it very known to their kids that they loved each other and made us all feel loved. And it was just such a lovely place to be. And It was very, very, very happy from what I can remember. But I was also just the naivety of being a child. I think that's what I love. That's what I miss the most as well, is the naivety of the world around me. So yeah, I think that's one thing that I love about little me is how naive I was.
What would you ask for Christmas? What would you love for Christmas, even now?
Even
now.
Oh my gosh. A Nintendo. Yeah, a Nintendo. Because I think I got rid of mine through all the house moves and all the moves over here. I think I ended up getting rid of my Nintendo, and I miss it so much. So I think that's what I'd like for Christmas.
It's on the list.
Definitely. Hopefully the big man's listening.
Aoife, I thank you so much. There's so much love there. Always was. There's so much love there, and there's so much of the world at your hands, and you've been using your hands and your mind and all of you to create what you deserve. And all that work has been coming and is coming together. And I'm so grateful that you shared for everyone listening and for you. I'd love to, we keep connected anyway, but I'd love to maybe see where things go, as life journeys on. And for anyone, what would you say anything to anyone listening of what their next step could be? Or
I've always said it, rural Ireland especially is the enemy of progress, and your comfort zone, whether that is, filled with fight or flight, or just, you're too afraid to think outside the box, too afraid what people will think about you. That is also the enemy of progress. Just don't be afraid to speak up and to do what you feel in your heart and your gut is right for you.
So true. It's so true. Aoife, thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura.
And we'll talk again really soon.
Definitely.
Thanks, friend, for listening to the Thinking of Me podcast. I hope you found something within our story today that lands for you. You can keep up with us on Thinking of Me blog, Thinking of Me coaching, and Laura and Jean on socials. Go to thinkingofmecoaching.com/checklist for your checklist for self-fulfillment. Until our next chat, talk soon, my friend.